is the Book of Life. I'm Heidi Rabinowitz. Welcome to the Book of Life's 12th anniversary grand finale episode. Today, we'll hear from listeners and past guests, and we'll hear clips from some old favorite episodes. If we missed your favorite, you can find it in the full archive of past episodes at bookoflifepodcast.com and also on the Internet Archive at archive.org/details/@TBOL. During the Book of Life's coming hiatus, I may post occasional interviews if I come across something just too interesting to resist podcasting about. And I'll also post about any future podcasting plans, so don't unsubscribe. My new job at PJ Library includes overseeing the author newsletter, so if you're a creator of Jewish Kidlit, be sure to subscribe to that. I'll put a link at bookoflifepodcast.com. And I want all of you, readers, librarians, teachers, authors and illustrators, publishers, musicians, filmmakers, and Jewish culture fans to stay in touch with me by social media at facebook.com/bookoflifepodcast and twitter.com/bookoflifepod, by email at bookoflifepodcast@gmail.com, or by voicemail at 561-206-2473. And thanks, always, for being a Book of Life listener.
Hi, Heidi. This is Tammy Lehman-Wilzik from Israel. I'm really happy to be able to send you this message for your grand finale, because I distinctly remember when you reached out to me about my book, Passover Around the World, asking if you could interview me for your podcast. Yeah, it was the third book I'd written for the American market, but at the time I was a harried Israeli juggling sandwich family issues with a full-time, deadline-driven advertising business, and guess what? I had no idea what a podcast was. The experience was a real ear-opener, and the Book of Life became an enjoyable part of my life, allowing me to sneak in needed respites during nonstop deadlines. I'm still a harried Israeli, but now I'm finally retired, and the Book of Life is on hold? Hey, that's not fair. You've turned the page, and I'm confident that the new chapter in your personal Book of Life will be marked by a Heidi touch that's going to be one for the books. So I want to wish you hatzlacha rabah, Heidi. All the very best. Tammy. Bye.
Here's author Tammy Lehman-Wilzik talking about Passover Around the World in the March 2007 episode, Why Is This Podcast Different from All Other Podcasts?
My favorite custom in the whole book is the one about the scallion. The Iranian Jews, each one takes a scallion in his hand, and as they're saying the dayenu, then they come to the word dayenu, that they hit their neighbor next to them on the right with the scallion. Why am I hitting you with a scallion? Well, you remember when we were slaves, and if we didn't do the job, the Egyptian slave master, the taskmaster, was standing on top of us with a whip, hitting us. It turns the Seder into such a lively affair, and it's almost like a game. It's an interactive game. Another custom that is very, very, very popular amongst the Sephardim from different countries is a play where somebody plays the role of a Jew leaving Egypt. He goes and he stands on the other side of the front door. He's dressed up the way we would picture a Cecil B. DeMille Jew leaving Egypt, and he knocks on the door. And the father of the house answers the door, and they go through a rehearsed play live at the Seder. To the effect of, who are you? I'm a free man. Where do you come from? Then the answer is, I was a slave once in Egypt, and now I'm a free man. And then the master of the house says, and where are you going to? And the former slave answers, I'm going to Jerusalem. And then he's invited in to join everybody at the Seder table. It's just so wonderful. One thing that I've discovered as an Ashkenazi is that Ashkenazim are boring when it comes to customs on Passover. It's routine, well, we're dipping our finger in the wine, during the Esamakot. We're opening the door for Eliyahu. You don't find the flair that you find amongst the Sephardi community. Once you start scratching the surface and you find out about all these different customs, it's very, as they would say in the Hebrew, Ma'od pikanti. It really gets you going. It's a holiday I think that we all wait for the entire year because it's truly a family celebration. And integrating customs that may not be from your Eda, your ethnic group, into the Seder will make it a very lively and memorable evening.
Hi, Heidi. This is Pamela Ehrenberg calling, and I am very happy to leave you this message about what the Book of Life has meant to me. 10 years ago, I was so honored to be featured on the Book of Life for my first novel, Ethan Suspended, on an episode called Funny, That Book Doesn't Look Jewish. That episode marked the first time I tried on the identity of Jewish author. The warm welcome that you gave and the warm community that you've built changed not only the way I think of myself as a writer, but also what I write. Kol hakavod, and thank you for the chance to be part of this journey. I can't wait to hear what's next for you in your new role at PJ Library. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
In February 2008, we had a live call-in show to discuss Ethan Suspended by Pamela Ehrenberg in an episode called Funny, That Book Doesn't Look Jewish. Now I'd like to open up the phone lines to everybody who is waiting to speak. I'm going to unmute all of us so that we can all chime in. And what I'd like to do now is ask about your own definition of a Jewish book. So let's hear what our callers have to say.
This is Maggie. I think the characters or the content needs to be identifiably Jewish, not just that the author is Jewish. I mean, if Philip Roth writes a murder mystery that has nothing to do with Judaism, I don't think that qualifies as a Jewish book just because he's a well-known Jewish author. And I think it's entirely possible for a non-Jewish author to write a Jewish book.
I would agree with Maggie on that. Back in the day, one of the big Jewish books was Gentleman's Agreement by Laura Hobson, which was considered a Jewish book. But it was a Jewish book only to the extent that it looked at the Jewish situation from a different viewpoint. Yet in that day, it was considered a very Jewish book because it was the first time anybody opened the insider's eyes to what it was like to be the Jewish outsider.
The Jewish book, then, one that appeals to a Jewish audience, and it doesn't matter who writes it?
Oh, what you had said was that you could have a Jewish book that was written by a non-Jew. And I think that that's true. It doesn't happen very often because the most authentic books seem to grow from a tremendous familiarity and a connection, the emotional resonance, as it were. But it could happen.
Any book that addresses the Holocaust, even if all the characters are Christian, I mean, the book Thief, the Jewish character in there is really minor, and I think the book would have worked just as well even if the Jewish character was not in there. But because it addresses the Nazi time, this book then becomes of interest to Jews, even if there's not really Jews in it and the author's not Jewish.
Hi, I'm Janet Gingold. I think that Ethan Suspended is such a great book about understanding and reaching across ethnic divides. I really have a problem with calling it a Jewish book because I think it should be a everybody book. I don't want labeling it a Jewish book to inhibit other people from picking it up. I would like Pam to tell us how she sees the Jewish values that are portrayed in this book. I know that you said earlier that to you it was very much connected to the experience of this family with the civil rights movement and the fact that when everybody else left that neighborhood, they were the white family that stayed. Anyway, could you throw in some things there about how that experience fits in with Jewish values?
What a great question. I think it does fit in with some of the Jewish values that have been talked about from the various callers about tolerance and about crossing over boundaries. It probably also relates to the Jewish experience or the Jewish values that have come out of experiences of being in the minority and therefore feeling empathy and reaching out to other minority groups. Not to say that these values don't also turn up in plenty of other cultures as well, but the Jewish lens may have helped to shape my thinking on some of those kinds of values. I don't know if that gets it.
Yeah, that kind of gets it. Because I think the values in Ethan Suspended are some of these values of the way I see Jewish people who I know living their lives that may not be particularly observant in terms of, holidays and Sabbaths and dietary things. Fundamental values about other things about how you live your life in terms of how you relate to other people and how you treat other people as human beings, how you do good things for other people, how Ethan knows that the right thing to do is to warn Diego that he might get hurt. All of those things, I mean, they're not just Jewish values, but they're very human values that are part of what underlies the story in a way that it makes it very full of values. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you.
This is Anne Dublin in Toronto, Canada. It's been a pleasure to work with Heidi over the years on the Book of Life podcast. Not only have I enjoyed hearing your interviews with an amazing group of writers and illustrators, but I've also been happy to present your listeners with interviews of talented Canadian authors such as Aubrey Davis, Kathy Kaser, and Eva Wiseman. Thank you, Heidi, for helping to introduce Canadian literature to a wider audience. I wish you all the best as you begin your new job with PJ Library. May you go from strength to strength.
As the Book of Life's Canadian correspondent, Anne Dublin interviewed over a dozen Canadian authors, illustrators, and musicians for the show over the years. She was also a guest in a very early episode talking about her own book, Bobby Rosenfeld, the Olympian Who Could Do Everything, in February 2006. Now let's hear a clip from Anne's October 2008 interview with Aubrey Davis about his picture book Bagels from Benny, in an episode for Blog Action Day on the theme of poverty.
When Benny inadvertently helps a hungry man by leaving the bagels in the ark, I just wonder, the man pledges afterwards that he will do good to others because he received good. So can we talk a little bit of how Benny's good deed extends to other people?
It's a matter of an action. Any action has rippling effect. So for good or ill. So, and whether we're conscious of it or not. I mean, Benny's done this thing with very good intent. I'm not aware of exactly what he's doing. Nevertheless, the act itself has consequences. And I think that may represent, in part, what it's like to be a human being. There are things every day we say and we do. We think we're doing one thing, they have other impacts. And it takes a tremendous amount of perception to see what in fact is going on.
Aubrey, you're a storyteller and you're very familiar with folk tales. Why do you think so many folk tales deal with the theme of poverty?
I'm not sure it's so much a theme. It's present in folk tales, and I think it represents something about human beings. I don't think this is literal. It's probably our condition from the fall of Adam, even, that this is a great poverty, impoverishment of the human being, from where we were to what we've become. We've lost something, and we're trying to at least get it back, if not move beyond. So it's our condition, and it's where we all start from. So you'll see many stories will start, there was once a poor man, woman, couple. There are orphans. There's all manner of ragged beings in folk tales. We don't bring the kind of reading to folk tales that Jews have traditionally brought to the Torah. And I'm not saying that they're equal, but I'm saying that the kind of approach to the folk tale, at minimum, should have that similar kind of approach. It tends to be very literal. Either it's just entertainment, or among the Jewish people, I've seen this again and again, what is the moral of this story? And you wouldn't do that if you're studying the sacrifice of Isaac. You wouldn't necessarily say, what is the moral of that? That is not the way Jews have looked at that story traditionally. The best of the folk tales, I think, need that kind of open, prolonged engagement to begin to understand what they are and what they can do for us.
Hi, Heidi. This is Yael Zoldan. I just wanted to say that I'm so happy to hear about your exciting new move. Before you go, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank you for the podcast. It's always been so informative and entertaining. I always really enjoyed it. And specifically, I needed to offer you a personal thank you. A long time ago, back in 2014, I met you at a conference, and during the lunch break, you asked me if you could interview me about my new book, Shimmy Shambone Will Not Take a Bath, for the podcast. It was a very impromptu request, and I was terribly, terribly nervous. But you were really kind, and you calmed me down. I think I might have even sounded coherent in the interview. So I wanted to thank you for that and for all the work you've done all these years, and wish you best of luck in your new position. I'm sure wherever you are and whatever you're doing, you'll be advancing the state of Jewish literature. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and good luck.
Here is Yael Zoldan sounding very coherent in her interview about Shimmy Shambone Will Not Take a Bath at the Seminar on Jewish Story in New York City on the November 2014 episode Seminar Stories.
I was saying that often the Orthodox presses have the issue that they don't want to take a kid with a problem and fix his problem. They'd rather start with a kid who has no problem and make him even more perfect than he was to start, which is not very realistic. Unnatural and not realistic. Feldheim didn't actually give me that issue. In my book, Shimmy Shambone Will Not Take a Bath, Shimmy starts out dirty. He does end up clean because we want to teach kids to take baths. But they did let me start out with a messy, dirty kid, and they were okay with that as long as I ended up in a place that they felt comfortable in. I think there are some publishing houses, and I won't name them, that have this kind of credo that, Jewish kids particularly are different than regular kids. And they're not bad, and they don't do anything wrong. And I don't think that speaks to children. I definitely don't think that speaks to their parents. And it's very hard to read a book to a kid that you find uncomfortable or unnatural. I know from reading to my own kids, I like something that I can relate to, and they like something that they can relate to themselves. And they find themselves in the mess as much as they find themselves in the solution, I think.
So how do you think it affects those readers, the Orthodox children and their families, when so many of the books they're presented with are the unrealistic story of the wonderful, perfect child?
So I think it was even more problematic years ago when there was less variety in the Orthodox market. There is more variety. There are more houses popping up, and I think that they recognize that that has to be amended to some extent. There is a lot of morality playing into the stories that we tell. And we believe in teaching moral lessons, but I think that the more it comes to light, that you can hear a moral lesson better when you can find yourself in it. And the more it comes to light that a fun story is a good story, more so than a didactic story, I think kids will have an easier time and not be searching further afield. There is a certain niche market in the Orthodox publishing world that will only read Jewish books, and they will only read characters that look like themselves. So that doesn't speak to me personally, but there is a large market that will not read secular books at all. So they need, more than anything, kids who run across the field and get messy and get dirty, so they know that that's normal and that that's okay, and that not everybody just sits and smiles up at their rabbi in class the whole day and listens to their mommy, and that doesn't happen. It's difficult for children to read that. It's difficult for children to feel bad when they compare themselves against that, especially for those kids who don't get to read the whole gamut of what's at the library. So when you're writing for the Orthodox market, I think that you should bear in mind that they also need to know that they're children first and little morality students second. That's what I think. That's my agenda if I were to have an agenda, which I hope I don't.
Okay, very good.
Heidi, I'm thrilled for your new adventure. I very much enjoyed hearing the podcast from Book of Life. I especially appreciate the reviews and interviews of new books, but love the book about RBG the most. Such a fan of that amazing woman. Thanks for all you do to contribute to Jewish literature, Jewish libraries, and all of us librarians. You are so appreciated. Yasher Koach, Susan, Nashville, Tennessee. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks to librarian Susan Pankowski for calling in about one of my own favorite interviews from November 2016 with Debbie Levy, author of I Dissent, Ruth Bader Ginsburg Makes Her Mark. Ruth Bader Ginsburg has a sort of cult following that the other Supreme Court justices just do not have. So what makes this little old Jewish lady so cool?
She became a cult figure because she speaks up. She's not a yeller. She's not a screamer. She doesn't make things personal. One of her close friends was Antonin Scalia, and two people on the Supreme Court could not have disagreed more on legal issues and probably on policy issues as well. But they heard each other. They didn't just scream at each other. They heard each other. They exchanged ideas, did the work that they needed to do, and then, their families went on vacations together, and they traveled together, had holidays together. So there's much to admire about her for her outspokenness and also for the way she is outspoken, which is in a respectful way.
Okay, good. There was a remarkably passionate essay at thepicturebookreview.com that suggests that kids see this book as a superhero book, that it sort of sends out secret signals with the lettering and the body language of the illustrations. How do you respond to that suggestion?
I say, yeah, man, absolutely. I saw that review, and then a couple of days ago there was a review in Elle magazine, or at least their online version, a roundup of books to start your baby's feminist library. And there were a bunch of great books that are listed there, and she gives little reviews of each of them, and I Dissent is included. And the author said something like, my toddler loves the book, and she can't quite get her mouth around Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but she calls her Ruth Bagel Wonder Woman. So there's the superhero thing again. I think it comes largely from the art and from the design of the book. I mean, look at the colors. They're bold and deep, and Elizabeth Badley's hand lettering is superhero-y like, I think, and throughout the book, important words, many of them, of course, synonyms of disagreeing and dissenting, I protest, I object, and et cetera, are all done in Elizabeth's beautiful, balloony hand lettering, like maybe in a comic book. I like the idea that aesthetically, and I think the message also, it reaches out to boys as well as girls. So yeah, bring it on.
How can this book, I Dissent, help us in the current contentious political climate?
Readers of this book, the adults who read it and kids, will be reminded that it's possible to seriously disagree and not pull your opponent apart, pull your opponent down, use intemperate language. It's possible to disagree without being utterly divisive. For that reason alone, that is, because of what's going on in our public discourse right now, because of the presidential election, read it as an antidote to poisonous discourse. It's possible to seriously, vehemently disagree and not be a jerk.
Perfect.
Hi, Heidi. It's Kathy Pinchuk. I wanted to say I have mixed feelings about the end of the podcast because I really enjoyed listening to it, but I know you're moving on to bigger and better things. Really meant a lot to me. I was very impressed with your technology, and I felt really thrilled to be a part of the show. My favorite interview, I think, was with my former rabbi, Rabbi Moshe Rosenberg, when he talked about the Hogwarts Haggadah, because he used to be the Star Trek rabbi, and now he's the Harry Potter rabbi. The weirdest thing for me was hearing myself on your podcast, but you are an excellent editor, so I was pretty impressed. And I'll really miss the show. So good luck in your future endeavors, and I'm sure we'll be in touch soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Librarian Kathy Pinchuk was a guest on the Book of Life in January 2009 and January 2010, announcing the winners of the Sidney Taylor Book Award when she chaired the awards committee. But the episode she's fangirling over in her voicemail is much more recent. It's from the April 2017 interview with Rabbi Moshe Rosenberg, author of the unofficial Hogwarts Haggadah. Let's get started by establishing your geek cred. Just how big a geek are you, and what are your fandoms?
Oh my goodness. I am a pretty big geek, very science fiction oriented, more devoted to space opera than to fantasy. Being called the Harry Potter rabbi is, I think, a modernization and perhaps a step up from being known as the Star Trek rabbi before that. I take pride in being able to find meaning for life and for religious life all over, but especially in the worlds of science fiction and literature.
What inspired you to create a Harry Potter-themed Haggadah?
It was actually a natural offshoot of another book that I wrote. In 2011, I published Morality for Muggles, Ethics in the Bible and the World of Harry Potter. And that book was my first attempt at putting together themes from Jewish tradition and Harry Potter on serious issues of life. Jewish tradition and the writings of J.K. Rowling both try to deal with the crucial questions of life, questions of relationships, questions of good and evil, questions of education, and how often they coalesce and agree, and sometimes they don't. I see this all as an exercise to help myself and others know how it's possible to find meaning and guidance for living a meaningful life in everything that we do and everything that we read.
Give us a teaser of some of the Harry Potter content that you've woven into this Haggadah.
Ooh, that's wonderful. So the 4 questions already opens the door to the idea that the Haggadah is all about education. It's all about stimulating questions. It's all about catering to different learning styles. And isn't that, after all, what it's about when you have 4 houses in Hogwarts, each devoted to a different type of personality or a different learning style? They don't have to be identical to both get the idea that education has to be as individualized as possible. One size does not fit all. One of the questions that I ask students, and I just put a potpourri of their responses, is, how do you learn best? And I had the widest variety of responses, from a teacher standing in front of the room to through games to in my sleep, all different types of learning styles. And then, of course, is the idea that in order for education to work properly, you have to be a Lupin. You have to be open for students approaching you and asking questions. You can't be necessarily a Snape or an Umbridge who is so forbidding that it's very difficult to ask a question because you're worried that you're going to be slapped down. So that's a little bit about the 4 questions.
So a fan work that is Watsonian is written from an in-universe perspective in the way that Watson would speak of a Sherlock Holmes adventure. And the term Doyleist describes a real-life point of view in the way that Arthur Conan Doyle would speak of Holmes. So is the Hogwarts Haggadah Watsonian or Doyleist?
Well, first I need to know how you knew that before Star Trek in my life came Sherlock Holmes.
Aha! No, I didn't know. Lucky guess.
Well, I would say this is more Doyleist. I'm really standing outside of it. I'm not one of the characters. I don't enter the universe. I am somebody who has been suffused with the atmosphere of that universe and suffused with Jewish texts. I am the man who brought together chocolate and peanut butter to make the Reese's peanut butter cup and try and show how 2 of them can help you understand each other and appreciate each other even better.
Rabbi Moshe Rosenberg, thanks so much for speaking with me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful.
There you go, chocolate and peanut butter. As good a combination as your ears and this show. And today's retrospective was just the tip of the iceberg. We've had interviews about plenty of Jewish grown-up books too, and music, and movies, and weird web projects. Take advantage of the 12 years of past episodes at bookoflifepodcast.com. As always, background music is provided by the Freilach Makers Klezmer String Band. Thanks for listening, and happy reading.